dungeons deep on the hatch of
Yes, so Hairless here. Today we are back with a Patreon request, thank you for this one, and we are back with Peter Hollens. I'm very excited for this one. If you haven't already, please check out my Peter Hollens playlist card up here so you can see my previous reactions to Peter Hollens' music. This is Misty Mountains and he's accompanied by Tim Foust from Home Free. I've seen Peter and Tim work together before, again you can find that in my Peter Hollens playlist. This song is from 2012, it's from the film The Hobbit: An Unexpected Journey. I actually have a musical affiliation with this film. I won't say what it is, but it's always interesting receiving a request like this. Songs from the Hobbit films, they do seem to be quite popular. A previous Patreon request of mine was for Jeff Castellucci's I See Fire. I know Peter Hollens did a cover of that first, and he also did this song without Tim previously. Hopefully I can get around to them at some point in the future. As you probably know if you've seen my previous Peter Hollens videos, I really enjoy his music from the small selection I have seen so far. This song, it's very distinctive. It's a cappella, it's low set in terms of pitch in general, it features drone notes, harmonically it's very simple and quite archaic sounding, so it seems very fitting to have a basso profundo, that is Tim, joining for this one. The lyrics contribute to this archaic feeling too. There are many verses as we can see here. In the film I think there are just 2. This cover we'll be listening today, the video is 4 minutes long, so I'm curious what they do to elongate this original song which is only 1.5 minutes in the film. Will they have more verses? Will they have repeated verses? Something else? Let's get straight into it and find out.
Far over the misty mountains cold, to dungeons deep and caverns old, we must away ere break of day, to find our long forgotten gold. The pines were roaring on the height, the winds were moaning in the night, the fire was red, it flaming spread, the trees like torches blazed with light, the wind was on.
Oop. Right before Peter's solo here it looks like. I want to pause, we're actually quite a fair bit of the way through, 1 minute and 40 seconds. It might not seem like there's that much going on musically, but there is, and there's a clear effect of this song. There's a reason that the one from the film is so famous, even though it is quite simple. And I'd like to try and dig into that a little bit in this version here, and explain some of the things that they've done to kind of lean into this and build up on it as well. So if you don't want to hear my thoughts or my analysis, go to the timestamp. It's an interesting introduction, we get this kind of delayed lag effect. Really driving home the idea of multiple low voices, at least to start. In terms of key, we're up 1 semitone from the original, so from here to here. This intro, this is my first time really hearing Peter's lower register. I've heard it before, but here this is his lower parts, unequivocally exposed. It's all there is that we are listening to at this point. I mean, it's such a bass tone, it really could be Tim, but I think we just have to trust what we're seeing with the video at this point. Then we get a staggered entry, so the parts quickly coming in after each other, and that leads into this drone on this note down here. Just listen to that at the bottom. So what we're hearing, it's this open fifth drone, which just means 5 notes apart. This is an archaic sounding interval. I spoke about this in Voice Play's Valhalla Calling, and this is commonly used in music that's set in older times, at least per Western cultural standards anyway. In this chord, let me move it up to make it easier to hear. There's no third note to determine if we're minor, sad, or major. Happy. It's bare, so we have our drone note. There at the bottom, not changing. The drone note is down here, but I'm going to move it up here so it's easier to see. The note here is a D sharp, and we are in G sharp minor. This D sharp, it's just the start of the melody, which we expect to go. The root note is here, so the D sharp, it's note number 5 of the scale. Now, for the next bit, we've moved to D sharp minor. So this D sharp, it's actually the root note number 1 of the scale. It is strengthened harmonically. We then go back to G sharp, and the D sharp is again note number 5 of the scale. It's why drone notes are so powerful, I think so anyway, because the note itself doesn't change, it stays. It does nothing other than sound, but its role, its harmonic function, its strength changes according to the other parts that are moving. Also, I can't really say how many parts there actually are here. I can hear the drone in octaves, for example. Peter loves his layering, so only he can answer that. But being low down, the harmonies are harder to hear. They're harder to pick apart, especially when we have harmonics sounding as well. Essentially, this sound that we get at the beginning, it's like a bellowing organ, a mass of sound. Then we get Tim's entry. His voice suits it so well, I think it's obvious. I don't really need to go into why.
Far over the misty mountain.
I love the air that he's using on those higher notes. And then the noise he makes on the word dungeons.
2 dungeons deep.
Imagine hearing that in a dark cave or something. It rocks your body, how percussive it is. Then we get this chord progression, which I like.
He must away. Ere break of day.
And then we eventually go to that root chord, the G sharp minor.
Gold.
But between, they stop off at a major chord.
And how long?
We're hearing this chord. So from the chord before that, they slide up and then go back down to that root chord. Our home key, G sharp minor. And for this major stop off, Peter joins in the melody as well in unison with Tim.
To find our long forgotten goal.
Peter then moves to clear harmony with the melody. He moves up in pitch.
We're roaring on.
And thus begins our gradual move into the higher registers that we begin to hear a bit later on. You might find that Peter's harmony here sounds a little bit strange.
On the high.
And that's because it is. As I mentioned earlier, this is archaic sounding harmony. This particular type of movement, parallel movement, so when the parts move up and down precisely together, usually 4 or 5 notes apart, it's called organum. It was a type of music developed in the Middle Ages, and by this clip, you can see what I mean. Simply put, why it sounds strange and archaic, it's because moving in parallel motion like this, exactly 5 notes apart, it's stubborn. It doesn't account for any adjustments. And in modern music, you will need to make adjustments here and there based on the harmony around. So sometimes if one of the parts moves up, the other one will stay, because that is what fits in with the harmony. So in this performance, here's an example.
We're moaning.
On that word moaning there, let's have a listen again.
Winds were moaning.
Staying 5 notes apart, and I'll play them in the same octave so it's easier to see, it means Tim is here and Peter is here. If we take the bass note that we can hear, that kind of organ pedal sound right at the bottom, and we add it to this chord, then it sounds like this. So adding in the bass note, again all in the same octave, this is what we get. Let's move Peter's note down. Look at this clash here. So by staying precisely 5 notes above, Peter isn't adjusting, he isn't singing the note so it matches the bass line, and in turn we get this clash. So overall the effect is very old sounding, but we have dissonances that are typical of modern music. These dissonances are possible because of Peter's layering and using multiple parts, and it's why we don't really get them in the original song.
The winds were moaning, yeah.
Right, let's carry on from where we got to.
The wind was on the withered heath, but in the forest stand beneath, their shadows lay, be night or day, and dark things silent crept beneath.
Wow, that section just there, so cool. I like how as we move on it seems things are getting progressive and slightly more dissimilar to the original song. Let's go over a few things from that second section we've just listened to. From where we carried off, we've moved now into Peter's melody, and this chord progression that we hear, we come straight in on it, the start of a verse, and I think it's one that you would expect to hear at a cadence, so usually at the end of a phrase or a verse, not at the start.
The wind was on the withered heath.
This is also due to the fullness of the sound here. So in the top part there, in Peter, we can hear, and in the bass part we get, and it's Peter's top part there that is slightly funky, and it's exaggerated by the downward motion. It descends, the first interval small, the second interval larger. So it's like a drop. The final note is here, and this turns the rest of the chord that we hear, which is our root chord, G sharp minor, into minor 7th chord. In other words, it's modernizing it. And then the next chord progression as well, yeah, I mean, just not what you'd expect.
But in the forest stand
Wonderfully chosen chords, I think. Really enhancing the mystical feeling of this fantastical made-up paradigm. The world in which The Hobbit takes place. It's almost magical in a way, like fairy tale. As we've seen before, Tim and Peter have a great blend. This is so useful when creating these massive chords via multi-tracking with loads of parts.
be night or day.
There's one note there that doesn't change. So Peter has taken the drone concept that is so prevalent in this song, and he's moved it up, so the drone is no longer at the bottom. That note, it's the top note of his melody, which is then sustained on as the melody moves.
Be night or day.
It stays whilst the chords around it change. The result, again, more dissonance and juicy chords. It doesn't stop there though, it continues through the next chord progression.
Silent crept beneath.
ending on that really, really rich chord. Nice harmony, complex harmony too, but it does not detract from the song's sentiment. Alright, then we get the next bit. I could talk all day about that, so let's try and rapid fire some of the main talking points, and I'll kind of play through it as I speak. Number one, the reverb effect. It sounds cool and it's like a little echo, so it enhances dissonances because as the chords change, the previous chord will kind of be left over as it fades out. Number two, there are no lyrics, which is kind of ethereal. Number three, couple this with Peter soaring up to the heavens, using his head voice, moving higher. And number four, there's this sort of... I don't know how to describe it, I'm no audio engineer, but this kind of lag effect, the rhythmic relationship between the various parts seems just to be the tiniest bit off, obviously intentional, especially as we move from the higher part to the lower part. Number five, or is that number six? No, number five, the drone note, this D sharp like we saw at the beginning. It's now changed here, just before a lower bass part then comes in. Taking over that organ pedal function as Peter hits his highest note yet. Yeah, and one more thing, number six, the handover between parts. For example, if we move back a bit, Peter's part, his melody, it's then handed over to one of the lower parts. I think it's Tim. And then back again, and then they do that a couple of times. I mean, considering everything else that we've already mentioned, it's a little bit difficult to tell who that is exactly, but that's a good thing. That's what you want with a song like this. Good blend. And then this section overall ends in a comparatively straightforward manner. Yeah, that was a really nice section, and that's where we got to. So let's carry on until the end now.
The wind went on from west to east, a movement in the forest ceased, but shrill and harsh across the marsh, its whistling voices were released. Farewell we come to hearth and home, the wind may blow and rain may fall, we must away.
Oh, yeah, that last section, we saw a couple of extremes, Peter going up there, Tim going down there. We'll get to that in a second. Yeah, these arrangements, they do use dissonance heavily, and dissonance, it's a sensitive thing. Sometimes it can be a bit much for people. For me, I think these are just the right levels to kind of just make your face go... Alright, let's go over a few final points from that last section, from where we carried on.
The wind went on.
That chord there, it's just reminding me immediately of Black is the Colour of My True Love's Hair that Peter did with Avi. I think that exact same chord configuration must have been used in there at some point. And that cover of theirs, which you'll know if you've seen my ratings videos, I adore it. I listened to it on repeat for weeks. Arguably, I became mad. I gave it the second highest rating of any song I've ever reacted to. So for me personally and my musical tastes, yeah, it's just this style. The chords, the chord structures, the type of harmonies, the dissonances, they just work well for this type of music, I think, or this type of song. Again, we see an inverted drone note, so the drone has been pushed up from the bottom.
West to east.
And the chord that we get as well, lovely, scrunchy dissonance.
Went on.
We have a mix of voices here as well, lower chest voice, higher chest voice, falsetto, quite an airy sound. The dissonance resonates at these higher pitches much better than it does at lower pitches, such as we saw at the beginning when things sound a bit more, well, not messy, but a bit more of a mass, harder to distinguish the parts. And that is what this song is known for in the original. And this is because at higher pitches you get faster vibrations. Alright, and then that's the top G sharp, fair play. Very difficult to do quietly. That's pretty much as high as your typical chorus that is expected to sing. To put it into context in the world of a cappella, to all pentatonics fans out there, Mitch slaps are usually around this sort of pitch. From the ones I've heard anyway. That one is the exact same note. Everything here, it's ethereal, it's angelic. Very high up, the lowest part is his melody. Across the marsh, which isn't particularly low. And with all the other parts, this chord is the same chord as earlier, just a moment ago. Just this note here has moved up. In case we're getting too carried away with the high notes, Tim then comes in to bring us back down to earth, literally.
Farewell we call.
Also nice imagery here. Peter in the light, Tim in the dark. And then the final phrase, so many scrunchy chords. Yeah, I love them. I know others might not do, but I do. And then of course that last note, Tim goes over an octave down on that descent. Alright, well, let's leave this one there. Overall, I really liked the arrangement. I liked the added parts, especially the lyric-less, reverby part that they had in there. Peter, often referred to as the master of layering. Yeah, we can see why. This song itself, I can understand why it is famous and why it's a fan favourite. Personally, I'm not attached to it that musically, the original song. I'm not saying I dislike it, but I've never heard it and just gone, wow, that's remarkable. So I really do like it when artists, musicians such as Peter and Tim can take this and completely transform it, change it. Yeah, overall, really enjoyed that one. Thank you again for this request, and thank you as always to everyone for watching. Would appreciate a like and subscribe. If you enjoy my content, want to support me, join the community and vote on future polls, you can do so by joining the Patreon that you see on the screen now, and I will see you next time.